stuff on Azure. I'm Blaze Stewart. I am giving the webinar as well. I am a Microsoft Azure MVP. I am a architect at Wintellect, and I've got a bunch of Azure certifications. So Azure is what I love and do all day long. So I hopefully can impart some wisdom maybe to you guys as we go through this deck here. So a few housekeeping things though. I do want you to ask questions. Feel free at any time to post a question in the questions feature of GoToWebinar. I'll get to those at the end. So if there are no questions, then that's fine too. But if you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those for you at the end and make suggestions or offer advice, things like that, or just technical questions that you might have, and so on. So this webinar is again, going to be recorded. We will post it on our YouTube channel, so you can check it out there if you don't get a chance to watch the full thing, or if you might want to follow up and review it, and so on. So everything is, those are some common questions that we get. So with no further ado, let's jump right in and start talking about Azure and tagging and policy. Just a little bit about who we are at Wintellect, of course. We want to let you know about who we are a little bit. Wintellect is a company that was founded by IT experts. They're industry respected experts in various fields. And we have two main lines of business: consulting and training. We were founded as a training company, the training branch being part of what we do with the webinars as well as on-site training. And we also offer classes as well as an on-demand training platform, Wintellect Now. And then our consulting business is where we kind of come alongside of you and we help you solve your business challenges. And most of what we do is oriented around the Microsoft space. So we do a lot of work in the Azure space as well as app dev work. And we help folks maximize their business needs through technology that we are experts in, which is, like I said, Wintellect being a strong partner with Microsoft, have a lot of competencies in that space. So let's go right to the content now for the slides that we have available here. So I want to talk about, before we get too deep into this, I'm gonna kind of give you an overview of what we're gonna be talking about for this webinar. This webinar is focusing on technology, of course, but I also want to talk about strategy a lot. So a lot of the content that I'm gonna be talking through, especially during the early part of this around tagging, is about strategy as it relates to Azure tagging, because this is one of those things that it can be hard to get a handle on, because tagging is so open-ended. Most people don't really know what to do with it. They understand the concept is very simple, but how you use it effectively can be a lot more complicated than it seems. And so what I want to offer you is, as we go through these slides, is some possibilities as far as strategy goes for tagging. I'm going to turn my camera on so you can see me and maybe see that on the screen there. So the Azure tagging is pretty much like you see here on the screen. You have tags that you apply to resources, and this is not that hard to understand. I mean, this is not like rocket science here. You have a tag that basically has a key value pair, and that key value pair looks like what we have here, where you have a key, and that key might be owner or unit or environment or whatever you decide for your key, and then you assign a value to it. And in this case would be the owner is Blaze, the unit, the business unit is accounting, the environment is development, and this shutdown tag is shut down daily. And so you have this key value pair, and these are used to organize resources on Azure. So when we think about Azure, what we think about typically is we think about things in terms of resource groups, subscriptions. We think about things in terms of these kinds of organizational structures that we put into Azure. That is the out-of-box experience that we have in Azure. However, sometimes there is a need to kind of organize resources that don't fit into those more hierarchical models that we have with Azure. And so the out-of-box experience with Azure subscriptions and resource groups, or maybe you're going with an EA agreement where you have management groups even, those kinds of abstractions don't fit well, and you need to be able to organize resources in other ways that helps you stripe your organization across your Azure resources in a way that doesn't fit into the hierarchies that are provided by project by management groups, by subscriptions, and by resource groups that we have. And that's where Azure tagging comes in. And it's just another tool that you can use for that purpose. And because Azure tagging is so open-ended, it can be applied in a number of different ways. And we're going to talk through some of that as we get through some of this content here. Tagging can be used to also help enforce policy and make accountability baked into the structure of Azure. And that's really what I want to drive at today, is this kind of enforceability and accountability that you have inside of your Azure strategy that was going to be more fulfilled by applying both tagging and policy in conjunction with one another. And it allows you to get a much more robust experience out of Azure than what you would get as a default option in Azure. So this is kind of where we're going with this, is to try to understand, one, how do you use tagging effectively? And then how can I enforce that tagging with Azure policy in order to get a more robust strategy out of tagging that will allow me to maximize my value, be able to do reporting, to get clairvoyance and monitoring going, be able to understand how my Azure spend is happening, and all of these kinds of things. And that's what we're really going to be talking about today. And of course, we're going to have technical demos to show you how to do some of this. So what are tags used for? Resource management would be one of those. Again, I'm gonna walk through a hierarchy here in a minute to talk about how you can use tagging and some strategies you can use it for. But resource management is one of those that we have. And this would be resource management outside of the provided resource management through resource groups and subscriptions. If you need to get a more robust tagging strategy across multiple subscriptions, you can do that through resource management with tagging. Another way to use tagging is for cost management. Now, this is one of the canonical uses for tagging in Azure. If you think about what you can do with tagging, is you can apply a tag to a particular resource, and then you can generate reports out of Azure Cost Manager to get some detailed information about how your Azure spend is happening based on the tags. One common way to do that is to assign a business unit, and that is to say, I want to organize all of my Azure resources around a business unit, and I want to do a bill back to that business unit based on their Azure consumption. Tags are one way to do that. And tagging in cost management is one of those canonical use cases, as I said already. Another one is you can use it for operational management. Operational management are things like what we have here with this shutdown tag, where we can use tagging to do Azure automation, and we can do resource selection based on tagging, or we can operate various kinds of Azure automations for specific tags, and you can apply, say, shutdown VMs that are in a specific environment at 5 o'clock every day. And you can do those kinds of things with operational management. Security is another thing you can use Azure tagging for. Now, security, as we think about it in Azure, we have, of course, the Azure role-based access controls that come with Azure. Those are very rich ecosystem for that, for controlling security. But sometimes security isn't so much one of those things that you do for assigning people to roles and then applying roles to resources. That's controlling access. But this is about wanting to prevent things from happening in your Azure environment. Say you want to turn on disk encryption for specific kinds of business environments, for different kinds of environments. So you can select basically tags and use those tags inside of Azure policy to enforce security rules that you're putting into your environment. So it can be used for that purpose. It can also be used for compliance and governance. So if you want to apply specific rules to specific environments or specific kinds of resources on Azure, you can do that. So you can tag things, and then with Azure policy, you can enforce compliance and governance as well. So we're going to look at some ways that you can do that later in the presentation. You can use it for automation, and of course, automation is one of the big ways that we use DevOps. We use our DevOps principles here. We can build various kinds of automations into Azure for doing maintenance on Azure, and you can use tagging to help filter and to help shape that process. And so all of these various kinds of things are going to be played in, especially automation, are going to be useful for tagging. And then, of course, workload optimization. Workload optimization is trying to figure out, it's the nexus of trying to figure out where my Azure spend is coming from, but also where my resource utilizations are coming from as well, so that I can figure out where things are happening, what applications are using my the Azure resources, where is the disk IO coming from, where's the network resources. You can help filter some of the data in workloads by applying tagging to those, and then being able to kind of filter out some of that data and figure out where I can optimize my workloads with the help of tags, if they're appropriately applied into our environments. So these are some of the uses for tags, and there's a lot of detail that go into each one of these use cases. But the idea of tagging, though, for any one of these is going to play into how you build out your tagging strategy, which is what I want to talk about next. So the tagging strategy really comes down to various types of tags. So when we talk about Azure and our tagging strategy, we want to think about things in what I might think of as a gradient between technical and business-oriented tag. So if you could think of a gradient about that, where we have on one pole, we have technical-oriented tagging, things that are useful for the operations of Azure. That would be things that are like environments and things like that. And then on the other end, we have things that are more business-oriented, things that really don't play into the technical operations of a particular workload on Azure, but have implications on how we might manage it when we're looking at it from a business perspective. And there is some middle ground there, and we'll talk about that as we walk through this gradient here of different types of tags. And so when we think about it, try to think of it in those terms, and we're going to start with the technical pole at first. So let's start off with the first type of tag, and that would be a functional tag. Now, a functional tag is really one that we use for organizing our applications that we apply to Azure around various functionality that's built into that. So one canonical example that we typically think of when we think of functional is the application tier. So if you can imagine, most applications nowadays have multiple tiers to them, where you might have a front end tier, we have a middleware, and then we have a back end tier, or maybe a database tier. And we have various tiers in our application that we want to organize around, but those all might be in a single resource group. So what we might do then in that case is assign a tag to each one of those resources that supports a specific tier. So the front end tier might be an Azure web app that we have running our front end. That could be a website, it's just static code, but it's just data being served up from that Azure website, and I'm going to flag that as tier front end. And then I might have some web services that help support that, and that might be my middleware. I might want to tier that, set the tier tag as middleware or service tier or something like that. And then I might have multiple, one or more databases. Maybe there's some kind of data backend that supports this. That could be some kind of workflows that data goes through. That might be my data backend. And I might have that 3-tier approach. It might be more tiers than that, depending on the application that you're dealing with. So functional tags are all about organizing things around the application specific layers and functions that go into making an application work. So the next level up might be a classification. And these kinds of classifications aren't so much application specific, but these, if we can think about these as operational tags that kind of stripe across more than one application. So the classification might be SLA. So one thing that organizations like to do is take a application and assign it a recovery tier. So tier 0 applications are the mission critical applications for a given company. And so the SLA on those is usually going to be, 3 nines or 4 nines, whatever it might be. Your RPOs, your recovery time objectives, your recovery point objectives are going to be very small windows of time. Say we can't tolerate more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes of downtime for this application, and we need it to be available, 24/7, or we need a 4 nines, 5 nines type SLA for this application. And we might assign such as an SLA as that as 4 nines, 5 nines, or we might do it in terms of tiers. We might have tier 0, and those applications are always available. And then some low priority applications might have be down at like tier 3 or tier 4, depending on how many tiers you might have in your SLA stack. Say the application that runs the on-premise library for employees to check out books is not considered a mission critical application. If it goes down, okay, somebody can't check out a book or somebody can check in a book, but it's not an important application for the operations of the business. So that one might be an SLA of a much lower grade, or might have a lower RPO or RTO classification that you apply to that. So these are the way to think about a classification type tag. So from there, we can go up to accounting. How are we going to organize these things around costs and business structures? So this is oftentimes where we apply tags like we see here with a business unit. And this is for managing the cost as it relates to the actual raw compute and the resources that are used inside of Azure. And we think about these as being things like a business unit or department that we can use to organize the resources around. So if I'm running an HR application in Azure, then I might assign the unit to be the HR department for that application. And so any Azure compute that is used will be either accounted for under that particular department, or if you're using a bill back model, will be billed back to that department, and then they will contribute a portion of their budget to the IT department to run that application inside of Azure in that respect. And so sometimes these units can be multiple levels as well. So you might have more than one unit. So if you have an HR department, but under that you might have a specific team that is running a specific particular part of HR. Say maybe it's employee reviews, and you have an employee review system, and you have a team that manages that. So you might have multiple accounting tags, and that's going to be true for any one of these. So it's not you might have multiple functional tags, multiple classification tags, multiple accounting type tags. All of these are legitimate uses of different kinds of tags. Now, what you need to do is try to figure out what your business needs are, and then try to apply these using that kind of gradient that I'm talking about here. Now, once we get out of these first three, we're going to start looking not so much inward at our business and operations of our business. We're going to start looking more externally, and that is where we get into partnerships and things like that. So we might have something like an owner tag. So in this case, we might think of these tags as being more externally focused tags, where we have a business partner where we are wanting to assess things from their perspective, and we want to see where our utilization or what applications or what resources really belong to the particular external business partner that we might have as well. And so this might be if you're selling software as a service and you are using maybe a separate database for each one of your customers. So you might want to tag each one of those separate databases as a owner tag, with an owner tag, so that you can get resource specific utilization patterns for a given business partner that you might have if you're selling software as a service. Or maybe you're running a business model that has multiple partnerships involved with that. So you have a external partner that is a co-sponsor of a project, and you're spinning up a website, for instance, or maybe you're co-selling some kind of product, or maybe there is a cross-functional engineering effort going on across a very complex system or product that you're trying to build, and you want to have systems that support that, and you can have specific pieces of that are assigned owners, and you can use those kinds of owner type tags as part of those partnerships. So it doesn't have to be the owner of the tag, it could be a complex array of partnership type tags that you might be applying there as well. And the last tag I want to talk about is purpose. And this could be a business process that is using to drive something about some kind of business value. And this is not so much something that is externally facing as much as it is something that is driving your business to make money or to drive your business to accomplish its goal, whatever that might be. And that process is usually something that we think about as a initiative, like we think sometimes we think of our processes in our businesses as initiatives for doing something. So maybe a company starts a new line of business, like what we might do at Wintellect. We might think about starting a new line of business here, which we recently did, and we call that our cloud solution provider business, or a CSP. And maybe we're going to stand up some applications around the processes that allow us to operate that business, but we tag everything according to that so that we can track it according to the various processes that are driving that particular business. Now, an external customer isn't going to really care a lot about that, but internally, what we can do is we can kind of see where things are going, how things are being utilized, what I am actually using as a part of that process. Sometimes these purposes can be high-level purposes that are oriented around executive sponsorship in some cases. So a particular executive wants to create an initiative, and this VP of XYZ wants to have an initiative with his name on it, and the process would then be driven according to that initiative's name, or that purpose would be driven according to that initiative's name, or something like that. So this set of tags is really what we might want to think of as a gradient here, where we go, like I mentioned earlier, where we go everything from functional tagging, which is oriented around application-specific components, very technically oriented tags, to something that is completely business-oriented, that really has nothing to do with technical operations. It's more around business strategy. It's around business. It's around ownership. It's around what drives the business forward, and those kinds of things. And those tags don't have a lot of implications on the day-to-day operations, but they can have implications on what we see whenever we look at particular Azure applications and resources from the perspective of specific initiatives, and we can see how things are going in that respect as well. So these are the types of tags. Now, I want you to, when you think about these kinds of tags here, is to think about these in your organization as we move forward in this, because this is the crux of what we want to be able to enforce on Azure for whatever it is that we're going to be doing. And that's where we're going to be talking about policy next when we get into that. But just to talk about some limits of tagging before we get into just a quick demo of tags and what those look like. With a given tag, you can have up to 50 tags per subscription, per resource group, or per resource. So that means a resource can't have more than 50 tags. A resource group can't have more than 50 tags. A subscription can't have more than 50 tags assigned to it. Now, if you have multiple resources that have different groups, that have different tags, that's fine. So if I have a storage account that's got 50 tags, that doesn't mean that the next storage account has to have the same 50 tags. It could have different tags. I've never seen anybody get that high. I've seen some that have multiple tags and may have 10 or 15 tags, but usually never more than 20 or 30 tags on a given resource. If you're getting to that, I mean, that's usually the exception. But the tags limit is 50. I've never seen anybody get anywhere close to that, but it's just one of those tag limits that you can have. Another one is that you can have up to 512 characters in the tag's name. So this portion of the tag, the key is can never be more than 512 characters. The value is less than that. It can only be 512 characters for the value. I've never seen anybody exceed the key length, but I've seen some cases where folks ran into some issues where they were trying to have long values in their tags, and that was a problem for some customers. So they had to come up with some kind of abbreviation scheme to be able to represent the values by abbreviating things and to meet that 256 character value length requirement. And not every resource can have tags, such as routes and route tables. So not everything can be tagged. Most everything that is a what I might call a top tier resource. A route table can have a tag, but a route on a route table, I don't think can have a tag. So there are limitations to what you can do with tagging here. And that is what we can look at. Not everything is quickly or easily tagged, but every resource doesn't support it. But at the end of the day, most of the top level ones do, so that you can apply a robust tagging strategy to that. So just a quick demo, I think is the next one, is just to go open up the Azure portal and pull up just to show you what tags look like. And this is really not going to be anything, earth shattering here, because tagging on Azure is pretty basic. So let's go to the portal and just take a look at what a tag looks like, and just to show you kind of what that looks like in here. So, oops, that's the wrong subscription. Let me back out of that. I clicked on the wrong one. Let's go to this one. This is my dev subscription here, and I can get into this to show you what I'm talking about. So let me turn off my camera. So while I do this right here, and let's just go to turn off the camera so that you can see my full screen here, and make that a little bigger so it's easier to see. And let's come into this tags demo resource group that I have here. Now, these I'm going to be using this for other demos here on some of the future other demos for this particular webinar. So I don't have any tags here on my resource group, but if I wanted to, I can apply them here. I could create a tag right here. And if I wanted to, I can just say, what's the environment I'm going to be using? This is just pre-populating this based on some existing tags I've used in the past. So let's call this a dev environment. And let's say if I wanted to have my environment and my owner, for instance, I could put in Blaze as the owner. And let's say I want to put in the unit, and let's say accounting for the unit for this particular resource group. And so now I've just created 3 tags, and that's really all there is to it. Now I've got the 3 tags right here applied to this resource group. Now, if I drill down into this one, you will see that I have various tags applied to this resource group as well. And if I want to change those, I can do that. I can go down here and drill down into the tagging resources. I can click change, and I can change the values of these if I want to. I'm not going to do that because it'll break some stuff, because it'd fail the audit that way, but that's something we're going to look at policy wise. But this is how I can edit the tagging. It's very easy to do. And if I want to click on the tag itself, it's going to do a query on Azure about resources with tag environment. Environment is where it's dev, and I can get a list of all the resources available inside of Azure where that is applied. And so getting back reports like this it'll show me all of the resources where I have those tags applied. And so if I go down to the unit, if I have IT, I only have one resource in that, and I just click on that and I get a unit resource there. But if I wanted to go back up to the resource group where I had applied these tags, which is right here, tags demo, if I wanted to get a report or a list of things that have this applied to it, I can do that. I have 2 different resources that have a tag with unit set to accounting there as well. So again, these same kinds of filters can be applied to our resources as well as to our cost management on Azure, where I have those going on. So again, none of this is rocket science right here. The more complexities of this comes when you start to talk about policy. So tagging is more the strategic side of this. Policy is where things get more technical, and that's where I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about next. So let's go back to the deck and let's talk about policy, and let's just go from here. So Azure policy, as we know, is a way to enforce or audit on Azure. So Azure policy can be used to audit compliance of resources based on policies that we set. And there are 2 modes that we can use here. Audit is one of those. Audits are not used for enforcement. They're used basically to check to see if something is in accordance to how I apply the policy on Azure. So if I want to create a policy that has specific tags required, I don't have to enforce that. But what I can do is create a policy that will audit that. And so what I can then do is take the audit and apply an audit to all my resources, and it will show me things that don't have tags on them, and therefore they're out of compliance according to the policies that are set. And then in addition to audits with policy, you can do enforcement of policy as well. So what the difference here is enforcement can stop things from happening on Azure, while audit just shows you things that are out of compliance with whatever is applied in the policy. Enforcement will actually prevent things from happening or actually do remediations in some cases for things on Azure. So in the case of enforcing tagging policy, I can set an enforced policy on my tagging strategy to make sure that I end up with tags on all of the resources that I put into my Azure environment. And so that's really where policy and tagging come together. You could use enforcement and auditing, though, for a much broader scope than just tagging, of course. For instance, if I wanted to create a policy that required all virtual machines that have a NIC card to have a network security group, I can do that. I could create a policy that requires that resource be attached to the NICs on the VM. And if I wanted to require that VM have only allow specific ports, I can create a policy that says only these ports are allowed on NSGs for my virtual machines. And I can set up a policy to enforce that. I can deny port 2022, but I can allow for port 22 if I want to do that. So I can create policies that will enforce these kinds of security rules on Azure. So these kinds of things are the enforcement of security beyond just what we're talking about in this particular webinar, which is mostly the integration of policy with tagging in that respect. But policy is a very powerful tool for enforcing some of those rules that you have in your organization that don't come with the out-of-box experience that you might expect with Azure. So audit and enforce, just understanding the difference between those two is critical for using Azure policy as well. So let's go on to the next. Let's talk about the Azure policy architecture. So when I talk about a policy on Azure, what I'm talking about is a rule that has conditions on it. So it's basically looking at Azure, how it's configured, and it's looking really at Azure Resource Manager and looking for settings on Azure Resource Manager. And that's really what defines the rule. And that's my Azure policy. And there might be some actions associated with that. We'll look at an example of this in a moment. And a single policy is a single rule. It can have multiple conditions on it, though. And a set of policies can be organized into what we call an initiative. So I can have two policies, and then I can have two policies or more than that, and I can organize those into an initiative. And then with an initiative, I can then apply that initiative to one or more Azure resources. So I can take a initiative or policy and apply it to a management group. And in a management group is in an enterprise agreement is the ability to manage multiple subscriptions in an arbitrary hierarchy. And so a management group allows me to have more management groups under it and then more management groups under that. And then I can have a subscription inside of another management group, and then I can one or more subscriptions that are managed in an arbitrary hierarchy that is defined inside of management groups. I can apply policy at any point in that hierarchy using management groups. And I can also apply it at the subscription level if I so choose. And that allows me to apply a policy to an entire subscription if I want to do it at that level. And then, of course, inside of a subscription, I can apply a policy to an entire resource group. So that's the resource group level is the most granular organizational unit which you can apply a policy to. Now, all the resources in a resource group will be affected by the policies that are either at the resource group level, subscription level, or the management group level. So depending on how granular you get, depends on the scope of the policy. So I can apply initiatives at any one of these scopes, or I can apply a single policy as well. So I can create multiple policies, assign them to initiative, and apply that to a management group, or I can do that in a subscription or at the resource group level as well. So there is an arbitrary hierarchy here that I can create here that allows me to give various levels of hierarchies of management groups. If you don't have management groups available, subscriptions and resource groups will probably suffice for a lot of things, for many use cases as well. So just understand that initiatives and policies can be organized in initiatives, and either policies or initiatives can be applied to any one of these various organizational units that you have available in Azure. So the other cool thing about Azure Policy is you can get some out-of-the-box compliance with Azure. Now, you can do audits against best practices on Azure using Azure Policy. This is one of the cool features about Azure Policy that I think is really not a very valuable, one of the value props of it. So there are several different packs of policies. They're all organized in initiatives that you can apply to your Azure subscriptions or resource groups that will check it against best practices as defined by these various policies that are available in Azure. So two of the common ones, one that are just kind of out of the box things that you can do with Azure is to apply the Azure Security Benchmark and the SIS Microsoft Azure Foundations out of the box benchmark. This is one right here, to your Azure subscriptions. If you're not under any of these compliance types, things that you have to deal with NIST or HIPAA or any other compliance structures that exist out there, these two are kind of just some of the baseline best practices that you can apply to Azure just to make sure that you're going with what Microsoft considers to be best practices on Azure, and what SIS thinks is best practices for operating secure applications in the cloud. And this is the Microsoft implementation against the SIS framework. So Azure Security Benchmark is a Microsoft maintained standard right here, and it's kind of like the boilerplate, if you will, for Azure security. If you want to make sure that you're doing things according to Azure security best practices according to Microsoft, that's the one to use. SIS is an independent organization that exists for applying security to the cloud, and it's not, Microsoft does not manage does not manage these policies. Microsoft manages the policies, but Microsoft does not prescribe the actual the definitions that go into informing those policies. So SIS is independent. Microsoft will then create a policy pack that implements the best security practices as prescribed by the SIS Foundation. And then, of course, if you're under any of the government organizations, then you might have to be compliant with HIPAA, and you can HIPAA high trust, of course, or any of the NIST things that you might have to apply to. And there's several more out there. This is by no means exhaustive. These are just some of the high level ones that I've seen common. HIPAA is a big one when you're dealing with various kinds of healthcare organizations and those kinds of things. And HIPAA High Trust is the framework that they use there. And of course, there's various ones for different industry verticals. If you're dealing with something like finance, there's various kinds of compliance regulations that you have to apply to for all of those. And we'll go into the portal and I'll show you all that in just a second. Speaking of portal, let's hop over to the portal and just take a quick tour of Azure Policy for a minute. And so let's, I'm going to bail out on it, discard. I'm going to bail on that for a second, and let's go back over to the Azure portal here, and let's go back and look at policy. So just to show you some of these various things that we have here. Let's pull up policy, and this is policy right here to show you some of those various kinds of definitions you can get right here. These are the ones that are available. Again, NIST is one I pointed out. SIS is, again, another one of those you can get right there. IRS 1075, UK has their own standards for NHS. If you're applying to it, PCI compliance for various things related to finance industry there. You can have various high trust HIPAA, of course, NIST. There's another one. FedRAMP is big if you're doing federal work for the federal government. That's another one. that you might have to look at. So again, if you're dealing with Azure in any of these regulated, highly regulated industries, just scroll through these and you can again see a number of compliance packs that are arranged in initiatives that you can apply to your Azure subscriptions and get some out-of-box compliance, or see where you're not compliant and then fix those issues by just simply applying an audit against some of these policy packs that you have available on Azure. And so you can use these for various kinds of things here. Now, what you do when you create a policy is you first create a definition here. And if I'm going to filter this by custom policies here, you create a definition. And of course, with a given definition, you can come into that and you can then edit the initiative and you can see what policies are applied to that. I've got 2 policies in an initiative right here. I've created an initiative with 2 policies that I created here. These are just enforcing VM requires NSGs and NSG allow ports. These are custom policies that I created here that are for initiatives. And if I wanted to get custom, I can filter this down by policies that I've created. And I'm going to be looking at these 2 specific policies right here: required values for resources and required tags for resources as well. And you can organize these into categories as well inside of your policy definitions right here. So again, very easy to use interface for creating policies. The real meat and potatoes of this is if you get down into the weeds and you want to look at various policies that exist, you can come over here to policy. You can go into your built-in policies. And if you want to see something that's pre-built, that's already available, this is kind of the best, just a pro tip here. You can come down here and look at various policies that are organized according to various products on Azure. So if I'm interested in something like VM-oriented, virtual machine or compute-oriented policies rather, I can come over here and I can look at compute and I can filter everything right here based on compute. And if I wanted to say deploy virtual machines should migrate to, let's just do one by SKU right here. There's one that I like to look at here. Allow virtual machine SKUs. This is kind of one of those I like to demo simply because it's easy to set up. And what you can do with this particular policy is assign it. And what I can do is as I go through this wizard here for assigning it, I can create a scope for it. And this one I can assign it to a subscription. And if I want to do a particular resource group, I can do that. Let's just say this particular resource group, and I can do exclusions if I want to, give it a description, policy enforcement. This is where I can either do an enforcement or I can do an audit. And I'm going to choose disabled. So I just want to do an audit. I'm not going to do enforcement. I can audit against this policy if I disable it. And then I'm going to select the SKUs that I want to allow for. And so this would be a good way of controlling costs for virtual machines. So if I wanted to only allow specific SKUs of VMs, what I can do is then come in here and say, hey, I only want to allow D series VMs. So D standard 1 up to, or maybe B series VMs as well, because those don't cost much. I can say D2s are fine, but I don't want to go anything larger than a D3 without special permission. So those are the VM SKUs that I want to allow for all the resources on Azure. If you want something bigger than that, you need to ask for permission. And that would be one way to control costs on Azure. So I can apply a policy here, and then I can filter it based on that. So again, I then can go through this, do some remediation there's no process remediation on this. It would just simply be, it would prevent a VM from creating if I tried to, or because I have it disabled, I can do a compliance check to make sure that I don't have any VMs in my Azure environment that I'm assigning this to that are larger than those because I've only selected small VMs for that case. So that's how I can use policy in that case. So again, just a quick overview of policy right there. Let's go back to the deck for a minute. And I want to talk about the overlap of now with policy and tagging and talk about the where these two come together, where you can really get some value out of tagging by using policy. So let's go back to the deck here and just do a quick look at that. I need to swap the presenter view here and bring this over to this side. And let's try that. And I hope you guys can see my screen there. No, I think you guys are seeing the deck then. Um, this is because it's on the wrong screen. Let's go to, let's bail on this and get that so you can see something other than PowerPoint here. Let's go to slideshow and let's select monitor on my secondary monitor and start that. And I'm going to pull this over here. There we go. That's better. So let's talk about using Azure policy to enforce tagging, because that's kind of where these two come together. So Azure policy can be used to enforce tagging on Azure resources. Now, again, the reason you want to do this is so that whenever you go to create your Azure tagging strategy that we talked about earlier, where you go into your organization and you organize all your tags, you kind of get those organized however you want. You want to be able to make sure that your resources have those tags present so that you can enforce those as well. So tags can be used. You can do a whole bunch of different things with this. There's a lot of different approaches to doing this. One of the most basic ways is just to make sure that there are tags present on all your resources. And that's just basically say, hey, if the tag doesn't exist, it fails compliance. Or if you want to enforce the tagging on Azure, you can turn on enforcement and you can say, when a resource is created, it must have tags. If not, remediate, or there's two ways you can handle that. You can either assign some default tags, or you can just simply block the resource from being created and just say, hey, there's no tagging there. This will ensure that your tags have resources, appropriate values as well. You can enforce that with policy, and tags can be inherited from you can be inherited from a higher level resource. So I can inherit my tags from, say, my resource group down to my resources. This doesn't happen automatically. So if you wanted to apply tagging into your resources from the resource group level, you can set up a policy that says, hey, just inherit the values from the resource group, and then everything will be inherited that way. That doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes you don't want to do that. It depends on your organization and how you're organizing things inside of your resource groups and your subscriptions. So to do this, what you want to do is create a custom tagging policy or initiative that would support that. And so that's what I'm going to show you in the Azure portal. I'm going to show you some tagging strategies that I've set up just to kind of demo this. So let's flip back over to the Azure portal. All the code that I'm going to show you is available right here. So if I don't get back to this slide, you can go back to this repo here and check out these code samples and just tagging samples available on Azure portal. So let's go back over to the resource group and let's look at some of the policies that I have set up right here. So the backend policy, notice what I can do here. I can select all, and I can just look at some of the built-in policies that are available for tagging right off the bat. So if I don't have built-in policies, and I'm going to take out SKU right here, take out this filter, and this will show me all of the tags, all the various built-in tags that you can have for your various resource groups. Now, some of these are pretty useful, like inherit tags from subscription if missing, append tags value and its value to a resource group, add tags to resources. These are various policies that you can apply to Azure policy that are built right in. You don't have to create any custom definitions for this. There are limits to these because these are just going to say require a tag and its value on a resource. That doesn't require value on the resource. So if the value is not something you want to enforce, this built-in tag would be perfect for that. And you can then just create a require tag on this, create a policy for this, assign it to your initiative, and then you apply your initiative to your resource group. And then once you have that, you can also apply a bunch of other things according to that. So you could create multiple instances of this particular tag, this policy. So if you want to create multiple tags and require those on your resources, you would create an initiative with multiple instances of this particular tag. Another way to do it is through custom tagging, and that's where I want to show you, is just requiring tags. Now, what I can do through custom tags is what's available right here inside of this particular resource. Now, this particular one is one I wrote because it's a simple way to do this because it allows me to enforce a policy for multiple tags at once. And this requires custom code. And this is not too hard to get your head around, but because of time, I can't go through all the nuances of this, but I just kind of want to get you an idea of what custom policy might look like. So a custom policy has a name, of course. It's going to have a policy type, and custom, of course, a mode of indexed, or all. And a mode is it basically is a distinction between different kinds of resources on Azure. A policy, a mode that's indexed is something that's usually something that you can assign to an Azure region, and so it's indexed. A mode all means that the policy can be applied to anything. There are resources on Azure that are considered global resources, such as something like Azure Front Door, or something that's not region specific, and those are things that can have policy applied to them, but they're not indexed. And sometimes if you try to apply a mode of non-indexed, unindexed policy to a non-indexed resource, it won't work. It'll crash. So you have to set that mode. These are just some things that are created by Microsoft. When you create the policy, you don't have to do that. You can create parameters on your tags if you want. That allows you to create a policy. And then whenever you go to create an instance of that through an assignment, you can put in parameters and populate that. And then right here, this is where you set the conditions. Just like I said, whenever you create a policy, it's got a condition as a part of that. It's just an if. And so this right here says if all of these exists, it's basically saying if one of these is missing. So it's kind of reversing the logic here. If this is false, or doesn't exist, or this doesn't exist, then append some tags to it. So this is basically going to say create create some new tags to this. So create an environment tag, create a unit tag, create a shutdown tag if one or more of these doesn't exist on a resource. And so that basically ensures that any resource that falls under the jurisdiction of this particular tag, under the scope of this tag, will end up with all of these tags on there. And that's just one way of enforcing that. So if I wanted to enforce values on that, I can create a similar resource down here. And then I can create, basically, if any of the values of a given tag are not in, a given range. So I want to require that only the units available for a given unit tag are IT, accounting, HR, or management, or the environments are the only environments that are allowed are dev, test, UAT, and prod. These are the values, or essentially the predefined values for these different kinds of tags. I can use policy to enforce that as well. And so what I can then do is take these two policies that I have created here and combine them and apply an initiative to ensure that A, I have the tags available, and B, make sure that those tags have values that fall into a predefined range of values for my tags. And what this allows me to do then is create a tagging strategy that basically means that all my resources have tags, and all the values on those tags are predefined in such a way that the values will be useful for whatever processes I want to use around these. So whether that be my counting type tags for billing, maybe it's the operational type tags for SLAs, maybe it's the owner tags for business partnerships, whatever that might be. Policy enables me to implement that tagging strategy and enforce that tagging strategy so that nothing falls through the cracks. And that's why you want to take your strategy, figure out how you're going to use tagging, and then build a policy to enforce that tagging. And once you have these two together, you combine them in such a way that you can then create a very robust tagging strategy and enforce that on Azure to get a lot of that value added out of tagging and out of Azure that you don't get with the out-of-box experience in Azure. So let's go over to the portal, and I just want to show you the implementation where I have this done in the portal right here. I've applied those policies right here under my compliance right here. And this is, I've got some other initiatives that are applied to this. I've assigned both of those policies right here, and these resources are in compliance with those. So if I go into the resource tags, all the resources that are available in my resources in this particular resource group where I have these tags applied, or these policies applied, do have the tags that are defined by that policy. So I'm saying that I'm auditing those storage accounts that I've created here against the policy here. So I'm auditing, but I'm also enforcing it too. So I wouldn't be able to create a new storage account without those tags available. Or if I did, it's just basically going to add those tags for me. So if I go storage account here, I can create another storage account. There it is. And let's just click through one of these. I'm going to stick it in that same, that same exact storage account again. And I'm just going to click through this. I'm not going to apply any tags to this. I'm just going to take all the defaults on this, and it's going to pass validation. But when I create this, what I expect this to do is actually create the tags on the resource for me. So when I come back to this, I should be able to see some of the default tags applied to this because the way I've got those policies set up. I don't have them set up to deny, rather I just have it to do remediation on this. And because these usually take only a few seconds to create, you should be able to come back in just a few seconds with this. While this is running, let's see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions just yet. So, okay, so I just created a storage account, and that's exactly what it did, is it created some default tags on there because of the policy that I have in play on this. So you can go out there and define a policy that will set some defaults on this. Now, because these are defaults, they're defaults. I mean, everything is defaulting to dev, everything is shut down and never, everything is defaulting to the unit IT. And if I wanted to change that, I could as the default values. But in any case, if I was to create a default, use one of these tags and set the value to one of those predefined values, I could do that as well. So we're at the top of the hour here, so I wanted to open up the discussion to any kinds of questions you might have. I'm going to pull the slide back up here, so that in case you want to go visit that repo and check those tagging, those custom policies I have out there if you want to check them out. So that's all for this webinar. Thanks for attending. I appreciate it. I don't see any questions posed here. Let me pop this out here and see if I can get a better view on it. Let's see. How do you pop this out? I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling with GoToWebinar here. Oh, that's how you do it right there. And there's no questions. So okay, we'll wrap it up. We'll call it a wrap then. And thank you guys for attending. And hope to see you on future Wintellect webinars.